uphold with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You can be seated. We will open our commission meeting. I'm going to take a little executive privilege here and commend Commissioner Walker, who did a wonderful job yesterday at the Dr. Martin Luther King prayer breakfast, at the 18th annual prayer breakfast. And we thank you so much, sir, for the challenge provided for unity in our community and your wise words and being the keynote for that event.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a presentation this morning that we look forward to every year because of the brilliance of our team, and this will be done by Jeff Stearns, our city treasurer. So if you wouldn't mind, Jeff, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
You won't move into the word brilliance, I know, but we do.
Appreciate that. So that, as the mayor mentioned, we're doing an update on the pooled investment fund of the city. I'm reminded by various people that I have a time limit ever since they didn't tell me that the first time I did this. And I kind of went on, so I'll try to keep it relatively brief. One of my responsibilities as city treasurer is to invest the pooled investment fund. The pooled investment fund is one of four pockets of financial assets that the city has. The single largest one are our pension funds. They're not really city assets in the sense that they're for the purpose of paying pension benefits and retirement benefits, but the city does contribute to those and does have members on the boards that govern those. Those assets, as of the end of fiscal year 21, were almost $1.3 billion. We're going to talk about the pooled investment fund, so I'll come back to that. Another, more recently, is the Public Improvement Endowment Fund, which until recently was relatively small. But as you all know, the hospital made a $215 million payment, so now that fund is in excess, obviously, of $200 million. And then there's some smaller miscellaneous funds. All those funds have different characteristics. They're governed in different ways. They have different investment policies. This chart I'm not going to go through, but it's more for you all if you want to look at it later. We're going to talk about the pooled investment fund. The other funds are, in the examples of the pension funds, they're governed by separate boards. They have separate investment policies, and more to the point, they have a different kind of investments that they engage in. Most notably, they also have equities as long-term funds. The pooled investment fund does not. It's strictly for cash equivalents and bonds. The Public Improvement Endowment Fund is also a long-term fund, as are the others, so they are invested in different ways. But the pooled investment fund, which was $565 million at the end of fiscal year 21, it has a different purpose, which is liquidity and income for the city, since it includes all the city's various operating funds and reserve funds. It's managed within the finance department. It's managed under an investment policy that the city commission has approved and we've amended from time to time. And again, it only invests in cash equivalents and intermediate bonds. It does not engage in investing in equities or real estate or alternative investments, which some of those other funds do. So the investment policy, just as a reminder, under state law, there's two ways a city can invest funds. If they don't adopt a separate investment policy, they can invest in a limited number of investments. Intergovernmental investment pools, like what used to be called the SBA, but is now called Florida Prime, AAA rated money market funds, bank deposits, CDs, and U.S. Treasuries. On the other hand, if a city does what we have done, adopt a separate investment policy by the city commission, and if it covers the different aspects that are detailed in the state statute, you can invest in a wider variety of investments that you designate. That's what, as I said, that's what the city has done. We've adopted that policy, and it's audited every year as part of our outside audit. That investment policy covers all our operating and reserve funds, exclusive of the Public Improvement Endowment Fund. It has three goals: safety of principal, liquidity, and investment return. And in that order, safety is first, investment return is last. It lists the allowable investments that the pool can use. It provides for diversification in terms of limits on maturities, individual securities, how much can be in in each of those categories of investment. The last time we updated it in any serious way was in 2018, which we brought before you and you approved. Which made some slight modifications in terms of allowable investments and performance benchmarking. So, and feel free to interrupt me at any given time if you have any questions about this, because I'll just keep going otherwise. So the portfolio characteristics, what does it look like as of the end of the fiscal year? The first question is, you may have is how big is it? The average daily balance of the pooled investment fund in fiscal year 21 was $576 million. It varies over the course of the year from a low of little over 500 million to over 650 million. So there's a band during the course of the year that you have to manage as we have different calls on the funds of the city, debt service, operating expenditures, of those sorts. Over time, that's true, and this chart goes all the way back to fiscal year 01, which is the data that we could easily get. If you look at it over time, that's kind of always been true, that there are variations during the course of the year, but as you can see, it's fairly tightly banded, which is the highs and lows in terms of the size of the pool. They're pretty close to what the average is over time, and one advantage that has for the city is that you have a large pool of what we call stable assets, so that they can be invested a little farther out on the yield curve and get a little more investment return, because generally speaking, we're not going to be dipping into those anytime soon, barring a major emergency. So what does the pool look like in terms of what we're invested in by categories? We have a chunk of cash equivalents so that we have liquidity and we can meet our day-to-day bills and operations. Generally speaking, during the course of the year, that number is much higher than the 17% that's showing here. But at the end of the year, we send out actually a large sum of money to pay our October 1st debt service payments. So that brings the number down. But we have money in U.S. government guaranteed debt and federal agency debt like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, those kind of federal agencies. We have a small amount in taxable municipal bonds, some in corporate bonds, some in mortgage-backed securities, asset-backed securities, and then some other miscellaneous assets. In terms of size of investment, we like to keep it small, with the exception of cash equivalents, which we had, almost $96 million at the end of the fiscal year. The rest of the portfolio that's invested in bonds and a couple outside investments, they're small investments compared to the size of the fund. There are 237 different positions. They average less than $2 million each, which is less than 0.5% of the portfolio. The single largest position was $10 million, and even that position was actually a trust with 3 separate bonds in it, so our largest position was even smaller than that. But again, we're not taking a large risk in any individual investment, lots and lots of smaller investments. In terms of rating, this is what the portfolio looked like on September 30th. Large percentage in AAA, AA, single A, triple B, all of which are investment grade bonds or investments. There were some in non-rated or other investments. One outside fund is not rated that you gave us special permission to invest in. There are also a number of bonds, when they get very close to their maturity, the underlying issuers stop paying for a rating. So the rating agencies withdraw them. Generally speaking, we'll ride those to maturity and not try to dispose of them ahead of time. The next section is about investment performance. So with all those characteristics and the investment policy, how did we do? There's 2 ways to measure investment return generally that we look at, and I kind of noted them under the investment policy section. There are earnings, which is how much did you collect in interest income and realized gains and losses. And then there's a mark-to-market version of it, which is then you also add in unrealized gains and losses to account for the fact of how well the portfolio is changing as market conditions change. So for earnings only, during fiscal year 21, we earned a little over 3.25%. That's lower than it was last year, and I'll kind of talk about why that's true. But total earnings were about $18.8 million, again, lower than last year. But that earnings, those numbers for earnings are well above the earnings index that we benchmark against. And the reason those numbers are down is because of where the market is. And I will have at least one slide a little later to show you where interest rates, in terms of the kind of things that we invest in, are, and how it accounts kind of for how those numbers have come down. So just again, where's that $18.8 million? Kind of put it in context. These are the earnings of the pool year by year, going all the way back to fiscal year 95. You can see it's a good number, not the best number we've ever had. But again, that's a function of the interest rate environment. As I said, if you compare it to our earnings index, and our earnings index is something we calculate every month, which is how much would you earn if you put 20% of your money in cash and you put 80% of your money in a 5-year bond ladder. What would that earn? And the answer is for fiscal year 21, it would have been 1.45%, so it takes into account where interest rate environment is. But we earned 3.25% or a little more, so that's well above where the index was. And it provided a lot of extra income compared to if we had just done investments like the investment index. The earnings index, excuse me. So this is that earnings index over time. The index is the green line. The blue line is what the pool has earned. You can see for quite some time we've been well above the earnings index. And if you do the subtraction between those two numbers to say how much are we above or below the index in any given year, it looks like this. So obviously recently we've been well above the index, although those numbers, that gap has come down a little. And this is, I promise this is, where rates are. So in terms of the kind of indicators that we'd look at, the blue line is 1-month LIBOR, which is a proxy for what you're going to earn if you keep your money in cash. And as you can see, since 2008, with a little exception, that number's been very, very low. It came up during, through sometime into 2019, and then it's come right back down. So any money that we keep in cash, and we tend to keep more in cash than, a bond fund or an outside investor would do, because we need to have liquidity for city operations. In terms of investment return, that's obviously going to be a drag on investment return, and that's just fine, because number one is liquidity in terms of our investment policy. Then if you look at where 5-year bonds are, and this is like 5-year Fannie Mae bonds, just agency bonds, very safe investment. Where is that interest rate? You can see historically those numbers have come way, way down. They're starting to come back up as of fiscal year 20, but they're still at relatively low historic values. And when you're running a portfolio, obviously you have a bunch of assets that you have now, and you reinvest at the new higher rate, but only for a small portion of your portfolio. So it takes a while for increasing interest rates to actually kick in terms of performance in your portfolio. So I promised there's 2 ways to measure performance. The other is a mark-to-market measure, which is what you would see if you were looking at outside bond funds or investors in the market. So again, the difference is it's not only your earnings and your realized gains and losses, but it includes your unrealized gains and losses. So by that measure, during fiscal year 21, and under the 1-year numbers, we earned 583. So that's above the 326 that I was telling you before, which was just earnings and realized gains and losses. So that means that the portfolio has appreciated as well. That's how you get a 583 number for the mark-to-market version versus the 326 number for earnings only. So you want to compare that against a market index. Is that a good number or a bad number, including unrealized gains and losses? And the answer is we compare against the Bloomberg Intermediate Bond Index, which is the kind of yellowish orange block. That number was actually down during the course of the fiscal year. So we did quite well in that sense. And then again, you want to benchmark yourself against as many things as possible. So we also look at what did the median bond manager who manages intermediate bonds earn? And that includes everybody out in the industry who's doing this, in the private sector. And the answer is they eked out about a 0.25% return during the course of the fiscal year. So the number that we have is very good. That's just 1 year though. So if you shift to the right, these are the 10-year average numbers. So we earned an average of 330, including unrealized gains and losses. The index was up 2.51% per year, so we beat that over 10 years. And then the median bond manager was just a hair under 3%. We beat that. And if you kind of then do the percentile rankings to say, okay, what does that mean in terms of where you rank within the industry? So this year was very good. We're in about the top 3% in terms of return. Over 10 years, we're in the top quarter.
Well done.
And that's the end of the presentation.
Okay, excellent. Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Stern, for presenting, as you oftentimes have done over the years, to share with us how I believe we manage our dollars very well here for our city and for our citizens, you know, our ratepayers and taxpayers kind of thing. But tell me, how we stack with the industry as far as our ratings, industry rating, because I know that's important for us when we go out to, you know, to of course, do what we need to do to invest or take a loan or that kind of thing. How are we rating? How are we stacked? Are we still stacked, what, A+, A negative?
In terms of our bond
Our
ratings.
bond
or
Bond rating, yes.
ratings, yeah. In general, we have three different kinds of debts: the Lakeland Electric debt, water and sewer debt, and then the general, kind of the general debt of the city, what's called covenant to budget debt. All those ratings are in the AA category, which is very, very high for a municipality.
Well, I think that's good for the citizens to hear. That's why I asked the question, so it could be shared, because let them know, you know, how we stacked up when it comes to our investment portfolio and those kind of things. So my last question would be, as far as I call the PIF, the PIEF, I don't know how you can put it together and break a word out of it, but the Public Improvement Endowment Fund, do you see that done very well since we created that particular fund for the dollars we received from the hospital?
Yeah, go ahead. There is a slide here, but I have to kind of go over here to pull it up. It's a hidden slide.
Well, thank you for doing it.
Not a problem. So, to your question, Commissioner, we've had a public improvement endowment fund since 2016, when the hospital gave us a smaller payment of $15 million. We invested that, we put that into the pension fund as an excess contribution, and we get a credit each year, which we're recycling into longer-term investments as we get those savings. So through the end of fiscal year 21, that smaller investment has earned a 12.5% return. Again, that's a longer-term investment, so it includes equities, real estate, bonds, alternative investments. The more recent payment that I think you're referring to is the $215 million, which we got in September.
Yes.
Obviously, that hasn't had much time
Sure.
to be invested or do anything. As you may recall, back in April of 2021, you all created a new board to manage that investment.
Yes.
And that board's been very, very active. They've selected an investment consultant, recommended a new investment policy, which you recently approved at a city commission meeting. The board's done an asset allocation study. They're starting to select, they put the money temporarily in index funds until they could select kind of outside managers to do active management of those investments. We've already started selecting some of those managers, and we're in the process of doing the searches for other outside investment managers. That $215 million is up since September, at least through the end of December. I don't know about January yet, but again, it's only had about 3.5 months for that larger sum of money to be invested.
Well, again, I thank you for sharing the overall picture, because of what we, receiving the $15 million that we did get back in 16, and then how well that has proved to be of maturity, and well, not maturity, but, you know, having to have some time to show us the gains. And then, of course, what we recently did, of course, with the 215 million. So I just want to make sure we see what has been done to support that particular, I call the PIF, PIEF, that's my word, but thank you so very much, Mr. Stern.
Welcome.
Other comments? Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jeff, for the presentation. On the pooled investments, when looking out at the 2022 and the market and conditions, do you anticipate any changes, or does that asset allocation pretty much stay within those percentages that you showed from year to year?
Yeah, I mean, I have two comments. Number one is, if you go back to fiscal year 20, we kept a lot of money in cash. And we kept a lot of money in cash as COVID, became an issue for exactly that reason. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what would happen to revenues. We didn't know what we'd have to spend in terms of expenses. So we made kind of strategic decision to stay heavily into cash. And at one point, we were probably 40 or 50% cash, not knowing which way things were going to go. As things seem to have kind of come to more of a steady state, we're back investing, and you saw the percentages that you're referring to. Going into 2022, I'm sure they will change slowly over time. They're not going to change quickly. I mean, what's being anticipated in the market right now is obviously interest rates changing. Inflation is up, doesn't appear to be as transitory as people would like. There's a lot of speculation as to when the Federal Reserve will start to raise interest rates. It's good to have some cash on the sideline to take advantage of that when it happens. The Federal Reserve may also start winding down their bond portfolio, which will put more pressure on rates to go up. So increasing rates is the thing that we see going forward. That helps in terms of what our new investments, but if you do the mark to market on your existing investments, then anything with a fixed rate coupon actually goes down in value, which is only a temporary issue until it matures. But you can sometimes see that in the performance statistics. One way we've tried to deal with that is probably at least roughly a third, maybe more, of the portfolio is actually in variable rate debt, so that when rates start to go up, we will take advantage of that as well. Not for all of our investments, but for a chunk of our investments.
Thank you. Thank you for monitoring all of this, keeping an eye on it for us.
The significance of this is on the pooled and earnings performance summary. When you think about that being 18.8 million, if we were working at a median at the median manager level, that'd be $14 million-ish probably instead.
Or less. Well, for this year, yeah.
Yeah,
or less.
for this, yeah, or maybe even a little less. So the active management and the wise investment parsing that's being done here is responsible for at least $4 or $5 million than would have been done had it not been pushed harder, even though you're 2.2 million underneath your last year performance.
And again, it's better than that happens than you do risky things and try to chase yield, because that's how you get into trouble. So it's down, but it's down because the market's down, and in the long run, you're going to have to feel what the market is doing, and it's going to be reflected in your performance no matter what you do.
So if you reflect on last year, and of course hindsight's always 20/20, what do you wish, even though you have 273 positions, which is quite a few positions, so nothing's all that material in and of itself, where do you wish you had done more retrospectively, and what done less?
Well, we could have had a higher rate of return if we had not kept so much money in cash. But again, I'm not going to apologize for that. We did not know what was going to happen. So staying heavily in cash until you can see which way things are going. If I was a speculative investor or a hedge fund guy, I wouldn't have done that. But we're the city of Lakeland, and we're a municipality, and that felt like the right call at the time. We gave up yield as a result of that.
Sure, and that's understandable and protective and appropriate. What would be the minimal cash position you'd like to see in normal non-COVID years?
You could run at 10% cash for the city, given how stable our asset base is. And a bunch of our expenditures, our larger expenditures, are predictable in the sense that I know when debt service is going to go out, which is kind of one of the big swing items. This year, we have a different challenge, which is in the pooled investment fund, we just got $165 million in December for Lakeland Electric for the bond issue that we did. That's in the pooled investment fund. All that money is going to be spent over the next 2 years to build the new generating units and do some other work for Lakeland Electric. And that money, unfortunately, has to be kept relatively short because it's going to be spent over that period of time. So that's, it's not exactly cash, but it's pretty close to keeping your money in cash. So that, again, will keep numbers from bouncing back up quickly if interest rates go up, but that's the business that we're in, or one of the businesses we're in.
And you sold the bonds well, you know.
Yeah, those bonds, we ended up selling at 2.09% for a bond issue that goes out 25 years. So that was a very good rate.
Pretty sweet.
Really good.
Other comments or questions? Thank you for your tremendous work and leadership in this regard, Mr. Stearns. We appreciate the report very, very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I just could, I'd just reiterate what the mayor has said about Mr. Stearns. Lakeland is incredibly fortunate to have him on staff, and I can tell you our finance director, Mr. Brossart, and myself sleep much better at night because Mr. Stearns is keeping an eye on the ball. Now, he can't pick football teams for anything because he's a New England Patriots fan, but when it comes to keeping an eye on the city's investments, there's no one better. So thank you, Jeff, for doing such a great job.
And you're welcome for Tom Brady as well. I think was with the Patriots.
Easy answer. That's the easy answer. Oh, my. Okay. We have no proclamations today, so that brings us to the committee reports, and our chairman of our legislative committee is Commissioner McLeod, and so go ahead, sir. And
Well, as much as I would enjoy that role, I'm going to kick it back to the chair, Commissioner Walker.
because,
He is the chair. I'm just the new member on that committee.
right, but you weren't there, so go ahead, do the report, sir.
Whatever you say, Mr.
Yeah,
Mayor.
no, that's fine. That would be great.
Okay, thank you so much, and I'm gonna read from kind of my challenge here this morning. It's a little eye situation I want to read from the paper here. Legislative Committee, of course, was convened on January 14th, 2021. Of course, the committee met in the commission conference room. Myself, Chair, and Commissioner Sarah McCauley, Chad McLeod, members were present. I thank you, Commissioner McCauley, for calling the meeting to order at that time. And it was called to order at 8 a.m. Of course, Mayor Bill Mutz, Commissioner Stephanie Madden, Mike Music, and Bill Reed were present, along with David Shep of the Southern Group LLC and staff. Opportunities that he shared with us on that particular meeting day. Land Acquisition Trust Fund, the PRWC, Polk Regional Water Cooperative, House Bill 603, Senate Bill 1400. Bills were introduced to add the Heartland Headwaters Protection and Sustainability Act to the statutory list of projects to be funded through the Lakeland Acquisition Trust Fund. The goal is to seek $20 million per year. Senate Bill 1400 will be heard in its first committee in week 2, which is, of course, this week. Lakeland's 7 wetlands, House Bill 2243. This funding request was approved on consent agenda in the House Agricultural and Natural Resource Appropriations Committee in December. It is now eligible to be funded in the House budget proposal. House and Senate budgets are expected to be introduced in week 4. Thirdly, Second District Court of Appeals, DCA Courthouse, not a funding request, but expected to be introduced in the 2022-23 budget proposal. House and Senate budgets are expected to be introduced in week 4. And of course, another opportunity that was shared was building inspector certifications. House Bill 423, Senate Bill 644. Bills were introduced to address the shortage of qualified building inspectors. House Bill 423 passed its first committee. Senate Bill 644 will be heard in its first committee week 2, which is this week. Now he shared with us, of course, the challenges as we see moving into this legislative session. First is local ordinances was a subject, Senate Bill 280, House Bill 403. Bills were introduced to require cities to produce a business impact statement prior to passing an ordinance. The bills also allow for businesses to delay enactment of new ordinances by filing suit challenging the legal validity of the ordinance. Both bills have passed their first committees. Second challenge, business damages caused by government. Senate Bill 620, House Bill 569. Bills were introduced to create a cause of action for business to claim a taking if a local ordinance results in a loss of revenue of more than 15%. Both bills have passed their first committee. Third challenge, infrastructure project funding. Senate Bill 1162, House Bill 621. Bills were introduced to prohibit cities and counties that receive a dividend from their electric and/or water utilities from seeking state grant funding for utility projects. The bills have been referred to committee, and if I'm not mistaken, there've already been some change or some amendment that's moving forward with this particular bill. Another challenge, financial disclosure for local officials. Senate Bill 510, House Bill 301. Bills were introduced to require city mayors, commissioners, and managers to file full financial disclosure forms. Senate Bill 510 has passed its first committee. House Bill 301 will be heard in its first committee in week 2, which is this week. As you all know, we do file a financial disclosure, but it's not the full report, full disclosure form that this bill would be enacted for us to do, which is a little more lengthier in respect to what we do now, and when it hopefully don't pass. Affordable housing, the last challenge that he mentioned, is House Bill 553, Senate Bill 1170. Bills will remove cities from eligibility for a SHIP program and eliminate the statutory authority for sale program. House Bill 839 has been filed. Senate Bill 1170 has been referred to committees. I don't know if that's a typo or not, but it's a different House bill number. We might want to check it out. David Ship will provide this report every Friday, as he would do during the session via email. He will provide handouts for commissioners attending Days on the Hill. The commission discussed opportunities to amend the local bills or ordinance bills. Mr. Shep was optimistic. The PRWC, funding. Mr. Shep was working through the issue. The new legislature typically could not affect an existing contract. Moving forward would be the challenge. He would work to gain clarity on the issue. Companion bills, there must be identical bills passed in both houses to become law. The Land Acquisition Trust Fund is used for a variety of purposes. It was created by a constitutional amendment. It is for land acquisition, conservation, water resources, and protecting Florida's natural resources. Bills like the infrastructure project funding usually arise out of specific problems in one area of the state. And that's the one we're talking about. I think we've seen some amendments come through on that bill and are an attempt to fix that problem on a statewide basis as those kind of bills introduced. Myself, Commissioner Walker, arrived in the meeting at 8:14 that morning. I discussed the Monday morning call-ins that are done weekly by Florida League of Cities, and also discussed Senate Bill 1162, we just referenced again. And I thanked, of course, all the other commissioners for their involvement. The committee adjourned at 8:17 a.m. Mr. Mayor, it's for your approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. Discussion by commissioners. Any discussion or questions by the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Unanimously passes. That brings us to our municipal boards and committees report, and Commissioner Madden will lead that as its chairman.
Thank you, Mayor. The Municipal Boards Committee met in the City Commission chamber. Commissioner Stephanie Madden, Chair, Mayor Bill Mutz, and Commissioner Sarah McCarley, members were present. Commissioners Mike Music, Chad McLeod, Bill Reed, and Philip Walker were present along with staff. The meeting was called to order at 8:17 a.m. and the purpose of the meeting was to receive and act upon the following recommendations. On the Affordable Housing Review Committee, there was a recommendation from Annie Gibson to reappoint Heather Soloria to an additional 3-year term beginning February 18th, 2022 and ending February 17th, 2025. Commissioner Sarah McCarley moved to approve the recommendation. Mayor Bill Mutt seconded, and the motion carried unanimously. On the Beautification Board, there was a recommendation from Bill Cohen to appoint Margaret Guimond Grathwall and Ophelia Ann Mudy to 3-year term beginning January 18th, 2022 and ending January 17th, 2025. There was also a recommendation on the Beautification Board to reappoint Colleen Murphy to an additional 3-year term beginning retroactive to December 21st, 2021 and ending December 20th, 2024. Reappointing William Carew to an additional 3-year term beginning January 19th, 2022 and ending January 18th, 2025 was also on the same recommendation. Commissioner Sarah McCarley moved to approve the recommendation. Mayor Bill Mutt seconded, and the motion carried unanimously. On the Community Redevelopment Advisory Board, there was a recommendation from Elise Drumgo to appoint Catherine Lake to finish out an unexpired term beginning January 17th, 2022 and ending July 19th, 2022, and to serve her first 3-year term beginning July 20th, 2022 and ending July 19th, 2025. Commissioner Sarah McCarley moved to approve the recommendation. Mayor Bill Mutt seconded, and the motion carried unanimously. On the Code Enforcement Board, there was a recommendation from Sanqua Marshall to reappoint William Wainwright to an additional 3-year term beginning retroactive to November 1st, 2021 and ending October 31st, 2024, and also to reappoint David Hitchcock to an additional term beginning February 18th, 2022 and ending February 17th, 2025. Commissioner Sarah McCarley moved to approve the recommendation. Mayor Bill Mutt seconded, and the motion carried unanimously. On the Historic Preservation Board, there was a recommendation from Matthew Lyons to reappoint Jeremy Moses to an additional 3-year term beginning March 7th, 2022 and ending March 6th, 2025. Mayor Bill Mutt moved to approve the recommendation. Commissioner Sarah McCarley seconded, and the motion carried unanimously. On the Nuisance and Abatement Board, recommendation from Mayor Bill Mutt to reappoint John Quirk III to an additional 3-year term beginning February 1st, 2022 and ending January 31st, 2025. There was also a reappointment to David Duncan to an additional 3-year term beginning February 16th, 2022 and ending February 15th, 2025. Commissioner Sarah McCarley moved to approve the recommendations. Mayor Bill Mutt seconded, and the motion carried unanimously. As some informal items, which no action was necessary, we reported that on November 15th, 2021, the employees elected the following: Jim Studiel to the General Employee Pension Board beginning January 1st, 2022 and ending on December 31st, 2024, and Tom Wheatley to the Civil Service Board beginning January 1, 2022 and ending December 31st, 2024. The Commission discussed the appreciation of volunteers who serve on these boards. They take a lot of time and dedication, and we appreciate everyone who fills out those applications, signs up, and serves on the boards. And we encourage you as well at this meeting today to look on our website, to look to the vacancies, and to volunteer where you think it'd be a good fit. We appreciate all of the citizens who get involved in this way. The committee adjourned at 8:25 a.m.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
All right.
Second, I'll second.
And a second by Commissioner Reed. Discussion by commissioners. I will say some of the names chosen by Bill Cowan for his beautification committee sound like flowers themselves. You know, it's just even the beautifulness of the names. It's interesting. Any comments from the audience at all? Or questions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Unanimously passes. That brings us to our Real Estate and Transportation Committee, and new committee chair Mike Music will make that report.
Thank you. The Real Estate and Transportation Committee met in the Commission Chamber. Commissioner Mike Music, Chair, Commissioner Chad McClown, and Bill Reed, members, were present. Mayor Bill Mutz and Commissioner Stephanie Madden, Sarah McCarley, and Philip Walker were present along with staff. Commissioner Mike Music called the meeting to order at 8:25 a.m. The First Amendment to the lease agreement with Marathon FBO Partners, LLC was our topic. The First Amendment sought to provide Marathon with a rent credit for improvements to the leasehold completed by Marathon, which was requested by the airport. The airport requested that Marathon complete additional site work to further improve the property to ensure safety, continuity, and overall aesthetics. It was advantageous to the airport and Marathon to incorporate these improvements while Marathon's construction activity was ongoing from a cost and time perspective. As such, Marathon agreed to perform the work and have its engineering firm oversee the construction in exchange for a rent credit from the airport for additional work completed outside of the initial scope and of the overall project. The airport sought to provide Marathon with a rent credit for the following additional construction improvements, and they are the following. Fencing improvement and gate relocation totaling $118,072.93. The itemized cost of the fencing improvements were: 1, to relocate the gate at Gate 1. Electrical was $15,620. Relocating of the gate at 1 was fencing itself was $27,302. The conduit from Gate 1 to the new FBO gate was $26,952.93. Upgrade the vinyl coating on the fence line was $48,198. The taxi lane to access the northwest ramp and the east-west access roadway totaling $66,935.36. Of that cost, the storm structure extension under the new access road was $5,400. The taxi lane to access the northwest ramp fuel farm was $50,169.44. The temporary milling access road to the fuel farm was $9,180. Sod for the new east-west access road was $2,185.92. Electrical improvements for TWYA in the amount of $36,940. These improvements were to connect Marathon's ramp to the airport's existing taxiway system. Changes requested by the airport include mounting the taxiway edge lights on concrete cans instead of direct burial cable and stake-mounted lights to ensure reliability and lighting circuits along the airport's primary taxiway. The total cost for the electrical improvements included electrical labor and material. Pursuant to the First Amendment, Marathon will receive a rent credit in the amount of $221,948.29. This will be used to offset its monthly land rent and associated sales tax commencing February 1st, 2022 and continuing until such rent credit is exhausted. Marathon's current land rent and sales tax payment is $7,967.72 per month. The rent credit will only be applied to the underlying land rent and sales tax, cannot be applied to Marathon's fuel flowage fees, ad valorem taxes, utilities, special assessment fees, or other changes, except as set forth in the First Amendment. All other terms and conditions for this lease shall remain in full force and effect. Staff recommended that the City Commission approve the First Amendment with Marathon and authorize the appropriate city officials to finalize and execute the First Amendment consisting with the above specified terms. Assistant City Attorney Ramona Siriani presented this item to the committee. The committee discussed: 1, the credit would result in approximately 27 months with no rent. Secondly, it would be the sales tax would still be collected. Third, Marathon was currently open. Number 4, the new facility will be up and running prior to Sun and Fun, which was certainly important. And finally, the credit was for work done for all common areas, not just to be used by Marathon. The action taken was Commissioner Bill Reed moved to approve the amendment. Commissioner Chad McLeod seconded, and the motion carried unanimously. Committee adjourned at 8:32 a.m.
That ends the committee's report. Is there a motion to approve?
Move for approval.
Second.
And a second. Discussion by commissioners. Any discussion or questions by the audience? Hearing or seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Unanimously passes. This brings us to the approval of the consent agenda, which includes the minutes as well as item 6C1. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
And a second. Discussion by commissioners? Any discussion or questions by the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Also unanimously passes. And that brings us to a request to appear from the general public, and we'll have Dave Crowl regarding the sidewalk installation at Sandpiper, who has asked to appear before us. Mr. Crowl?
Good morning. My name is Dave Crowl. I'm a year-round resident of Sandpiper. We have a proposed sidewalk plan to go into Sandpiper, which caught us by surprise for the most part. The last time we knew, we were told that this project had been tabled, but apparently it didn't. We talked to the city, and the city has been very good about, giving us a direction to what to go for. And they told us that we should get a letter of protest and have signatures. So we did take the signatures, and I did send a copy to hopefully everybody. I know I see some of the names that are up here don't appear on the website, and the websites sometimes are not up to date when you go on the internet to get that information. We didn't really get any notice. The abutters were never told about this, and we had a meeting with. It was a neighborhood association coalition meeting, and Naomi, I think her last name is Lippert, not sure. She appeared, and that's when we found out about this project. Other than that, we would have woke up some morning with an excavator digging up front yards. We did get signatures, and we thought we got a good cross-section of the association, and we did not selectively pick those people that we thought were in favor of it. We went right down the line. We started on several streets. We could have gotten more, but we got roughly 250 signatures. Since I've sent the signatures into you people, we've got several other signatures. We thought it was a good cross-section and shows a trend that how many want to get the sidewalk and how many didn't. In our gathering of getting signatures, we did not list those who were in favor of the sidewalk, but we only got about 4 people that were in favor of the sidewalk, and one person that said that they didn't have enough information to make a decision one way or the other. The impact on that this sidewalk is going to have is that the original plan shows reducing a row of about 18 30-year-old palm trees that line one side of the entrance into Sandpiper, which makes it fairly attractive. There are palm trees on both sides. There's a financial impact on the abutters, which weren't notified. And again, I don't see where there was a traffic study done, and there was no feasibility study done. And we've spent a lot of time surveying this. And at one night, I actually took a film for about 15 minutes on a Friday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I stood there with my phone and filmed it. And then when I went back later to review it, I thought I had made a mistake and took a picture because nothing was happening, literally. And I'm not trying to be funny. But the residents don't seem to see a need. And we don't really want it. We feel the city can do better with the money someplace else. The street through Sandpiper is adequately wide to accommodate walkers and traffic, which is very, very limited, the traffic. And the street is wide enough that probably 3 cars could fit, across the street. So one person walking, and there's adequate area for them to get out of the way if there is traffic coming. And we think the money could be spent somewhere else, and the residents don't see a need. Thank you. And I have two other people with me that would like to speak also. Thank you very much.
If we do that, let's just do that so that each of those other people are 5 minutes or less, if they'd like to speak. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I also live in Sandpiper. I live on Sandpiper, McCall and Sandpiper. And the way I found out about these sidewalks was one day last summer, there was a guy measuring in my front yard. There was never a public notice or anything else I think the city should have put down some signs saying there's possible going to be a change to your property. Because now, I put in a yard a couple years ago. I would not have put in a yard if I know a guy's going to show up in the morning with an excavator, tearing out my yard. Also, I'm going to be required to move my sprinkler system. And like Dave said, the road is extremely wide there. I'm one of the few people still work in Sandpiper. I'm not retirement age yet. And there is no rush hour in the morning. It isn't like there's, certain, like a certain allotment, 75, 80 people all of a sudden pull out of their driveway and head down the street to go to work. We don't have that there. And when I am home, I'm out working in my yard. I've got a beautification award. That'll tell you that I'm outside all the time working when I'm not working. And I don't see that many people actually walking down the road. And if they do, the road, like Dave said, is extremely wide. I've never seen anybody almost get hit. And if they're afraid of walking on the main drive, there's umpteen roads in Sandpiper that you can walk that isn't a through street. And people that have driveways are going to be affected because now you're going to have to make your driveway abut up to the sidewalk. If they were going to do this, it should have been 30 years ago. I took a photo this morning of the palm trees Dave was talking about they're going to tear down. It looks very pretty on both sides. There's palm trees lining both sides of Sandpiper. Well, you go by the golf course, and they already have the 7-foot sidewalk they put in when they built it. And it's barren. It looks like a desert. And we've already got enough building going on here in Lakeland where they're tearing out trees and everything else, for progress. Why tear it out here and make it look ugly? You're going to come in, there's going to be a big 7-foot line sidewalk going down the road. The other side's going to have palm trees. After a while, sidewalks crack, they break. I took a photo this morning of where the gutter is, and there's a good tripping hazard on the one by the golf course, about 1.5 inches where the sidewalk is here, and then there's where your storm sewer is. And when the city came to that meeting, I asked them, if somebody trips on the sidewalk in front of my house, who gets sued, me or the city? And they couldn't answer that. So if I have a tripping hazard, and somebody falls on my sidewalk, who's going to pay for that? Because every time somebody falls anymore, they're going to sue. And the city couldn't answer that question. So do I have to inform my insurance agent, when I get a sidewalk, now I have a sidewalk, possible somebody could be in my yard and fall? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Please state your name, please.
I'm old and I've got a little stiff sitting there, but I bought my house 4 years ago, and one of the reasons I bought it was because it was beautiful there. I didn't buy down on the other side of Sandpiper because they have a 7-foot sidewalk that's never taken care of. It's black from mold. I don't want that in front of my house. My issue is I put a $12,000 driveway in. I do not want a sidewalk in front of my house. I'll have to tear that whole driveway up. It'll cost me $20,000 to do that, because they'll have to tear it out and put it all back to match the sidewalk. So I don't want to do that. I have a business in Michigan, and if I listened to a couple people that wanted something done there for me, and I spent my money foolishly, I wouldn't make any money. And I think this was an appropriate place to come today because you're talking about money. And I'm a money guy. I've done it for 26 years. I'm not going to spend my money foolishly on something that's not needed or wanted. Thank you.
Thank you. And what was your name, sir? Gary Douglas and
Scott Corbin.
And Scott Corbin?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, any other comments? Yes, sir. Just ask one question. You need to do it at the mic, please. That way it gets broadcast.
One thing is, we're fairly new to this. We had to get direction from the city as to how to go through this process, and hopefully we're in the right place. But we don't know what the procedure is from this point on and what happens now. We'd just like to know where this is going, what's going to happen with this. One thing that I didn't omit was that most of these signatures we got are from year-round residents. They're not from snowbirds. We did, in our survey, we did come across a lot of houses that were obviously not here for the season yet, that obviously are snowbirds. The shutters were all drawn. There was no activity in the yard. There was nothing out there. But we'd just like to know where it goes from here. Thank you.
Well, sure, and if you could stay for a second, there might be other commissioner questions. Do you have any yes, Commissioner McLeod?
Oh, I wanted to get an update from staff on where the project stands, what we're doing as far as the next steps. That would be helpful for me before I have any other questions.
All right.
Well, Naomi had given us a blueprint.
Yes, sir. You'll respond. So our city manager will respond on that.
Okay.
Okay.
An update on where we are. First of all, let's kind of go back and I'll tell you the way that that this project began was actually from a request from the commission, and the commission had initially heard from some homeowners who had represented the neighborhood association, and that question came forward, and so staff then started developing the project based on that. Some of the questions that were initially received were related to, if this section of Sandpiper developed today, would it be required, to have these types of improvements? And the answer to that was, yes, it would by today's standards. It had not been included because when this phase in the past was developed, that wasn't a requirement at the time. So based on the questions and information received from the commission, we did move forward, and Public Works did have a public meeting, and at the public meeting, the responses were about 50-50. It was pretty split on whether or not, the neighborhood desired the improvements. And so staff has continued, or did continue on at that time, with the surveying and design work, and we are at about 60% of that process. Some of the requests that did come out of the meeting, and additional information and requests that have come recently, we are able to go back and make some adjustments to the design work to accommodate things like a narrower sidewalk that would not then harm the palm trees that we've heard a desire to maintain. So that's basically where we are right now. Since we started hearing some of the concerns, we've basically put the project on pause to have these further discussions and get further direction on which way the commission would like to go.
Now, if I could add one thing, we did get signatures, and we didn't spend an awful lot of time getting these signatures. And we did take a cross-section of not just Sandpiper, but other streets in there to see, and most of the people that we talked to never even heard about the sidewalk project. I'm not debating. I know I'd never heard anything about it. And we are prepared, if these aren't enough signatures, we're prepared to go out and do every street in Sandpiper. And if you can see where the streets are listed on the signature page, you'll see that we just went down the street, not paying any attention who was there. We did have one fellow that gets out and walks every day, and walks pretty much the length of Sandpiper, and he was not in favor of the sidewalks. He says there's no need for the sidewalks. And like I say, if it'll make an impact, we will go back to the signature process, and we will, solicit everybody in the place.
Well, I think we'll be pretty aligned with you. Commissioner Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for coming and sharing. But I want to make sure that we do understand, process. Now, if I heard you correct, Mr. City Manager, the neighborhood or this particular case moving forward, notice was given. Okay, now I want to make sure I heard that. Notice was given because we're hearing from the ones that stand before us now that they didn't know anything about it. So even if the commission, and of course, I've been here 12 plus years, if the commission made a request to be known for sidewalk kind of the situation to come about, and we have to go, of course, make that particular request align with what we call our ordinances call for, but did we make sure, we noticed before all this began?
Yes, sir. We have gone through the process that's required. We do have staff in the room, and we may even have the dates. I'm not sure if we have that timeline. Ryan Lazenby, if you're all familiar with, has been the lead on that project. And so let me see, Ryan, do you have more information about the notice and the timeline?
Let me add, if I may too, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to see, to know that we are at a pause now because we need to bring, I think, this particular situation in some kind of perspective to align with what we know process calls for. So that's why I wanted to make sure I heard that first.
So good morning. My name is Ryan Lazenby with the Public Works Engineering Division. So this project was placed in the CIP in around 2018 after citizens from the neighborhood contacted a commissioner who in turn forwarded the request to the city manager's office. And basically the discussion was Sandpiper was built today, that as the city manager indicated, that this sidewalk would be in fact required and be a part of what the developer would have built. In fact, a phase was constructed last year that has sidewalk along a boulevard and internal to development. So we began working with the Homeowners Association president, and you'll have to forgive me, I think his name was Mr. Roy. Was that your president? He was past president. Yes, approximately a year and a half ago, so shortly after it was placed into the capital improvements program, talking about hey, you've got palm trees out there, there's some driveways with some pavers, there's some pattern pavement or stamped concrete driveways. Here's some of the things we're going to have to overcome. What do you think? So Sandpiper has approximately 810 single-family homes in it, and it has some multifamily units. So what we typically do is try to work with the Homeowners Association, who can in turn work with the residents in there instead of, kind of going door to door to 1,000 homes. So we went through that process, and that's what you probably saw out there getting measured. And the Homeowners Association president at the time voiced his support of the project. So what typically happens then is we go get survey and begin design. And when we get to that 60%, around that 60%, that's when we start our public involvement, or going to the neighborhood and saying, here's what we're looking at, here's some of the constraints. And what my staff does typically around that 60% is we try to work with Kevin's office to do some social media splashes so we can solicit input. The reason we do it around 60% is, quite frankly, we don't have anything to show them until that. We don't know about the palm trees, the sprinklers, the pattern pavement, so we have to get some survey data and put some line work down on paper so we can have something to show with them and discuss the concerns with them. So we participated in a neighborhood meeting on December 9th. And again, that's about the first time where we actually had something to show the residents. But keep in mind, we have been working with the president for over a year. And we heard things like, hey, we're worried about the palm trees, and they're nice. They're mature palm trees. We heard about impacts to sprinkler systems. We heard about the width of the sidewalk. So what we've done since then is we said, okay, we can go down to a 5-foot sidewalk. I think we could avoid the impacts to the palm trees by changing the alignment. And I believe we can avoid the impact to the sprinkler systems by, instead of going with our city standard driveway, narrowing the width of the flare. At that time, Mr. Crowl and Mr. Corbin started contacting our office, and we kind of said, hey, we would appreciate if you worked with your homeowners association, because there is in fact residents within the community that are for the project. So if at a staff level, if we just say, okay, we'll delete it, well, there's going to be another group of people that come up here and talk to you guys the next month. And we said, work with your homeowners association, get us a letter or something, whether you support it or not, and we'll bring that back to city management and discuss it. We're by no means trying to throw this down your throat. So that's where we're at.
Thank you.
So it would seem prudent that we would put this on hold.
And we have. So as soon as they submitted the letter, we pumped the brakes and said, okay.
That's why I share, Mr. Mayor, as I just said, it's good to know that it is on pause, and it's good to know that we had the conversation so they could do what they need to do.
And then the HOA decide.
Yes, because it came from them, but it come from, it only came from them as a result of someone approaching one of the commissioners at that time, and that's back in 2018. I don't know. I wasn't the one. I can't say somebody else was the one, but it happened as a result of that kind of a relationship or that particular contact. So, and then again, let's the public know, who even listening today, understand how process goes. So that started it. Now we know we had a bump in the road now, you all. So we got to pitch it back and say, hey, as a homeowner association, you all need to decide, do you want to move forward or not? And I agree, you need to decide that before we'll continue. Would you say so, sir?
Yes.
Yeah.
Commissioner Music.
Yeah, so really kind of three things. One, do we have, you guys developed a budget already for this?
Yes.
Two, did you find during your survey that there's a need? We're hearing from certain people that, there's not enough traffic in the time flow. And number three, what do we do if we scuttle this for a little bit and then some people are excited about it? How does that work?
So there's approximately $300,000 budgeted for this project within the current fiscal year. Some of that's engineering design money, which we've extended about $10,000 or so, and a lot of that's working with the HOA to discuss the concerns and doing some preliminary survey work, and just to this point in design, there's about $280,000 for construction. So what happens if you delete this, the homeowners association comes back to you guys and says, hey, we don't want that, and we're directed to delete the project? Those monies will remain in the transportation fund. This is a city-funded project, and we have plenty of need, for the dollars, and we'll find a good place for them.
And then did you find a need as you guys are doing your survey?
What we did is we did remember, it came from a citizen's request. It was from an elderly person that said, hey, this is a 55 and up community for the most part, and we do not feel safe walking in the roadway, so we need sidewalks. So we did do a speed study in 2020 as it began. The average speed on that road is 21 miles per hour. We also looked at crash data. There's about a crash a year on that road. None of them involve pedestrians or bicycles. They're minor rear ends, people backing into a mailbox or something like that. None of those are documented crashes.
Okay. Well, I think pausing it's the wise thing to do then, so very good. Thank you for that, Ryan.
Into the comments, Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Assuming they want to stop the project, how many signatures would they need to get to facilitate, and can we give them 90 days to do this, or?
We can give them whatever we want from an engineering standpoint. We can keep the money there and keep the budgeted. That's a political decision. To me, it's, if they want the homeowners association come back and writes us a letter that we've met and we've taken a vote that we no longer want that project, that's just something from you guys to consider, and we'll find a home for the dollars.
There is no established number for that.
Okay. I was wondering again, sometimes HOAs, they don't communicate well as they should. Invariably, I know it is a bedroom community to some degree, but not majority-wise. And so they're going to have some empathy for the homeowners to get what they want. They're going to think, it's sometimes majority doesn't rule for a public, but there again, maybe what's best may not be what everybody wants, example. But I'd like to see them have an opportunity to let us know what they want. Of course, there again, we do have the cost of the sprinkler systems. That's included in there, and the fixing of if they have pavers, are we going to just go over those pavers with a sidewalk, or will they go? And how did that work? Do they have to?
So regarding the sidewalk, first, it's all within the right-of-way. It's not on private property. It's within public right-of-way, the whole entire project. So if the driveways are flat enough that they comply with ADA guidelines, we'll butt the sidewalk directly into the pavers, so there's no impact. However, we do have to maintain ADA cross slopes, which is 2% maximum across the driveway. So if we run into a driveway that is steeper than 2%, we will have to reconstruct the driveway apron up to the right-of-way. I've talked to our construction and maintenance folks after we participated in the December 9th meeting, and they do have a subcontractor that's a paver contractor that does the streetscape work and things like that downtown, and they'd be willing to utilize that to reset some pavers back, but we'll have to reconstruct that and put it at 2%. The pattern pavement, there's one or two driveways that are stamped concrete. The problem is we can't match it. We can't match it, and that's a problem with paver driveways too. If we get into a big problem, is we can't go out to Lowe's and buy matching pavers. So we can reset them, and that's what we would try to do in this project.
How many palm trees do we need to get? Do you anticipate?
I think we can avoid all but one, and we did have dollars in there to either relocate or replace that palm tree.
On the stamped concrete driveways, can you abut at the,
If it's 2% or less, we can abut directly up to it. And there's, in the total project limits, there is 10 driveways that we will be dealing with. About half of them are pavered or stamped concrete.
well, first of all, Commissioner Walker,
Oh, no, go ahead.
first of all, I appreciate the detail that you know about this project and the fact that the work is on pause.
Yes.
It would seem prudent to me for us to recommend that we funnel all of this through the HOA.
Yes.
You have an HOA, make sure the HOA is coming into agreement with it, take those petitions, go get more if you need them, but make sure that the HOA is representing, and then come back to us
Yeah.
with the conclusion.
And they've been great to work with, very polite and very, very easy to work with. So very much appreciated.
Am I assuming you're going to pay for my pavers to be relocated?
Can you repeat the question so it's all on
Repeat
the
the
record?
question.
The gentleman asked if we would pay for his pavers to be relocated. So when we impact a driveway with a sidewalk construction project, the reconstruction of the driveway is at the city's cost. So that would be part of the project. And like I had indicated earlier, we had discussions already with our construction and maintenance department about resetting pavers. The only problem is when we get to where we have to get new pavers for whatever reason, it's very difficult to match them. So if your driveway was relatively flat, we would try to just butt the sidewalk right into it.
My driveway is not flat.
Yeah, so we would
You have to go clear back almost to the garage to relocate those pavers.
So we'd have two options. If you would let us on your property, because remember, the sidewalk is in the public right-of-way, we would try to reset those pavers at our cost, no cost to you. If you just would say, heck no, I don't want you on the property, we'd probably make your drivers steeper within the existing right-of-way so we can get that ADA compliance across the sidewalk.
The goal as represented here is to work alongside as much as possible, which we hope the city will always do to the extent we're fiduciarily responsible. So thank you for that. And Commissioner Walker?
No,
Okay.
I was just agreeing with what you have already, I was going to say what you already said about making sure everything get funneled through HOA, and then we be made aware accordingly.
Commissioner Mann?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ryan. I'm so glad that you're participating in this process, and I just want to thank the residents for all of their hard work of reaching out to their neighbors. I lived in a neighborhood similarly where they did not want the sidewalk because it intruded too far into their yard. It disrupted the landscape that they had had for years and years. And, you know, it sounds like Ryan and his team are on it and thinking about the costs and want to think about the beauty and aesthetics, but I have seen city projects before where the grass that they pay for and put on the property is not the grass that matches what the owner, you know, had or would invest, and it's a different product at the end of the day than what the homeowner had initially or would do themselves. And so I know that is a concern anytime you modify a neighborhood, and what I appreciate most is certainly I think we like sidewalks and we like multimodal options and we like our standards in the city, but we have, like you said, a lot of projects that need funding, and so we would not know how it is to be in your neighborhood, you know, in your yard with your pavers, the unique aesthetics and the size and width of the roads. And so to me, I just love to observe this, you know, city servant leadership in action, and I think you're demonstrating both the residents, you know, doing the hard work of walking the streets and getting the responses from the neighbors, and our team, Ryan and your team, to work together, because funds are limited and we certainly have plenty of places that we can spend money and don't want to just use those funds unnecessarily. So thank you, residents, and thank you, Ryan, both for working together so that we get the best possible product at the end of the day.
Amen. Any other comments? All right, thank you very much for your time.
Commissioner Reed.
I'm sorry.
Do we have a date certain we need to get this done by?
Well, the
I don't know if we
HOA,
need to take
no,
it
no,
90
because
days or they'll just get-
it's a family meeting. You got to figure out what I want to do within our HOA and then come back to us.
From a
Otherwise,
city,
it's on hold.
from a city standpoint, we don't.
I understand, but I didn't know if we wanted this to hang out for a year, or if they're gonna have two HOA meetings, I didn't know, but just, It's just a good question.
We typically don't like to roll funds over to the next fiscal year, but, you know, we have done it. One thing for the homeowners to consider is right now this is identified and budgeted in the CIP. So if you change your mind, like we've been talked about several times this morning, is there's a limited pool of funds, you got to kind of get back in line. It's not like I can go pull those off another project and get in there. So it might be years before you can get, you know, this infrastructure in place again. Because we have to go, anytime we do something in a transportation fund, it's a domino effect.
It's the same way we have to work as a
Same, exactly.
with the state. So we all have that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Crowl. Just come on up to desk and then we'll be done.
You know, we have purposely made this a residence thing, you know, independent of the POA. The December 9th meeting that was had, we were told there was a meet and greet meeting, that we were just going to meet some city officials. There was no issues talked about. It was surveyed on the notice, and unfortunately, I don't have a copy of the notice, but I do have it at home. On the copy of the notice for the meeting, it said this is not a POA meeting, which I don't understand that because the sidewalks, there was no agenda, there was nothing said that we were going to talk about sidewalks. The other issue that came up was whether or not we could use golf carts to cross the streets. And we really don't have any faith in our POA. They have, our current president of the POA is a self-appointed liaison, apparently, to the Lakeland Neighborhood Association Coalition. And when I talked to somebody there, they said, no, that's highly unusual. And, you know, we would just like to do this as residents, but we do need direction as to what you want. Like I say, you know, we've gone out and we've got signatures. You know, it's no secret that this petition exists. People have actually stopped by and asked to sign the petition. And, you know, that we just need some direction. I mean, if this is still up in the air,
It isn't.
we need, you know, we need you guys to tell us what to do next.
Mr. Crowl, what we need you to do is do this through a POA. Make sure it's noticed. Make sure that people show up that sign those forms, and you'll have a good meeting, and there'll be a lot of discussion, and then you guys decide, and then inform us what you want to do. But you have a POA, and so you should work through it, and the residents that are on those petitions will come to it. Just make sure they properly notify what it is that, and request the discussion, and have it done. So if it's an internal family fight a little bit, which can happen in all of our families' lives, you're gonna have to work that out through the POA and the residents.
So what kind of time frame do we have to do this?
You have this fiscal year time frame to be able to get it done. That ends for us in September. That if you wanted to have the project done.
Oh, yes.
But wouldn't that be fair, Ryan? Okay, and so, but that's it. And then it'll be a rollover because we'll use those funds in another way. I have driven Sandpiper many times, and there's plenty of width on that street to be able to allow people to walk. And it is different in many cases from what we would typically have done then versus what we mandate today by code. So I can understand why a lot of neighbors would not want to have a sidewalk. But that's a decision you need to make.
Yes.
Through the POA and then come back to us, okay?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes.
All right, we appreciate that time, and it's good public discussion, as Commissioner Madden was saying, and that's part of the process. We have no equalization hearing today, so that brings us to our city attorney under public hearings for a second reading on Ordinance 3A1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have just one ordinance for consideration of adoption this morning. That is proposed ordinance number 21-050, an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Lakeland, Florida, relating to local government comprehensive planning, providing for text amendment CPA 21-001 to adopt a property rights element of the Lakeland Comprehensive Plan, our Community 2030, making findings, providing an effective date.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion to approve in a second, discussion by commissioners. Any discussion by the audience or questions? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote. Commissioner Walker?
Aye.
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 Yes.
Aye. This passes. It absolutely passes.
Enthusiastic.
It happens.
All right, then, under resolutions, we have Resolution B1.
Under resolutions, this is a Brownfield resolution. By state statute. It requires 2 public hearings. This is the first of those 2 public hearings, so no action will be taken this morning. This will come back to you for consideration of adoption on February 7th for a public hearing. And this is proposed resolution number 22-002, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Lakeland, Florida, designating property located at 900 East Bella Vista Street as a brownfield area, authorizing the city attorney to notify the Florida Department of Environmental Protection of said designation, providing for severability, providing an effective date. Again, that will come back for a second public hearing and consideration of adoption on February 7th.
Which moves us to the city manager, 5A. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. I have 2 items for presentation and 1 verbal. The first item that I have is regarding a change order with Hubbard Construction Company for runway 10, the Cat 3 approach at Lakeland Linder International Airport. With the placement of the Cat 3 system at the airport, specifically the glide slope antenna, the displacement of existing roadways, electrical, and water infrastructure were required. In the initial bid proposal by Hubbard Construction, the general contractor selected for the project, the proposal to complete the relocation of the displaced infrastructure was $500,000. The proposed cost, which have been reviewed by our engineering firm and staff, have been reduced. This change order is for the reduced amount of $434,373.74, which amends the total contract amount to $6,695,111. These expenses have been reviewed and approved by the Florida Department of Transportation. It's recommended that the City Commission authorize the appropriate city officials to accept this change order number 1 with Hubbard Construction Company for the amount presented. That completes presentation.
Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, a motion made by Commissioner Madden, was that? Or
Reed.
Commissioner Reed, sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, I just didn't hear it. It's my hearing. And discussion by commissioners or questions. Commissioner Reed.
I think anytime we can save $66,000 is a good deal.
Here, here.
I commend Gene, and I guess his team for putting this, I guess it's Gene, I presume, but thank you very much, and this is a needed component, and we're moving forward, and I'm sure we can use $66,000 somewhere else.
Yes, sir.
Here, here.
Any other discussion by commissioners? Any by the audience for questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Unanimously passes.
Thank you for those comments, Commissioner Reed. We don't often get to bring forward change orders for that type of reduction, so I appreciate the recognition on the few occasions when we can. The next item that I have is regarding a design build agreement with Register Construction and Engineering for the second floor terminal improvements at Lakeland Linder International Airport. The funding for the project has been included in the 2021 bond issuances that the commission will recall. The improvements to the public areas involve the upgrading of the public restrooms, renovations to the hallways, including walls and flooring, as well as modifications to the airport's office space that will provide for additional needed workstations. The office improvements will also include new fixtures, cabinetry, and electrical and data connections as needed. There were 3 proposals received for an RFQ, and the selection committee met back in December to rank the firms. Register Construction and Engineering was determined to be the most qualified for the project. The airport proceeded to negotiate with the top firm, Register Construction and Engineering, and have reached an agreement for them to provide the design build services to complete this project. Excuse me.
It's emotional.
In a excuse me, in a not to exceed amount of $325,000. It's recommended that the City Commission authorize the appropriate city officials to enter into a contract with Register Construction and Engineering in that not to exceed amount of $325,000 for the improvements. That completes staff's presentation.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Discussion by commissioners. Yes, Commissioner.
I just have a question, and this may be for our airport manager. So it's, I mean, having spent plenty of time out there myself, just for the public, if you can say, what is the reason that we're doing this? What is, I mean, the improvements are kind of outlined here, but for that money, what specifically are getting? What was the impetus to get this started? The funds have already been appropriated, which is great, but what's behind that?
Well, good morning, Gene Conrad, Airport Director. We've actually started, we were going to have a project to renovate just our offices and also increase the space for our ops department and move them out to the patio that's next to the restaurant, and we're going to build that out. That's where this whole project started several years ago, actually, and we had budgeted to plan to do all of this work, but there were other needs that kept coming up, so we kept pushing that money off or pushing in different directions for other projects that we had out at the airport. Through our bond issuance, we put that money back in so we could get this done, and now with the new restaurant, and if you've been up on the second floor as of late, it is very tired up there. It's been there for 2 decades and we haven't done anything to it. We obviously on the first floor renovated all that back in the early, 2011 I believe it was, prior to us having commercial service with direct air. So all of those, being tired upstairs, the new restaurant coming in, plus we had already planned to renovate and improve our offices because we just need more space for the people that we have added over time and get them out of closets in the copy room, and so they can have their own space. So this has been coming for many years, but we're just to the position to where we're ready to execute at this point.
And can you follow up with that? How is this construction going to work with the restaurant timing and things like that?
Well, the restaurant, all of that work is ongoing. So they have completed all the demo. They're now getting ready to start to put it all back because their intent is to be up and operating prior to Sun and Fun, obviously before Sun and Fun because they need to be open and make sure everything works. But we're going to be going in conjunction with them. Okay. So really the activity upstairs is only our office at this point and the construction with the restaurant. So all of it will be completed prior to Sun and Fun and their completion with the restaurant.
But I think too, he's asking, the restaurant used more area than you had anticipated they might when you were originally.
That is correct. So the restaurant, they're actually bumping out, if you remember the glass facade, they had bumped that out to the railing now, and then that open area where the lanai is, they're improving that as well and taking all of that. So we were planning to move our ops department out to that area, but they really wanted to have it for the restaurant, so we took the back seat and let them have it.
Well, that second floor is going to be something else here in the next couple of months.
It is going to be very special, so it's going to look great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. And Gene, I appreciate your being here today too. As you know, in the past, I'm a visual guy. When do you think we'll get a schematics of something of what's going to be done?
Specific for us or for the restaurant?
Well, not for the restaurant, for what we're talking about today.
Well, it's a design build, so we have to put it all together.
Okay.
And then we're going to be able to pick the carpeting and the colors and all of that as we move forward, but we don't have any of that as of yet because we need to execute this agreement so we can move forward.
Okay.
But it won't be a significant change, but it also needs to complement the restaurant that's going in as well. So we want to make sure it all looks nice.
But you will get Commissioner Reed and the rest of us copies.
You will all get copies of it. Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Any other questions from the audience at all, or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Unanimously passes as well.
One verbal.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just wanted to update and notify the commission as well as the public about an upcoming presentation at our February 21st City Commission meeting. We haven't talked about our partnership with Summit Broadband in quite some time. There's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes with all the technical staff, both here at the city and with Summit, to prepare for them to penetrate into the market. They have been devising a marketing plan, and including everything up through pricing and implementation. And so for strategic purposes, we've been giving Summit through our partnership some time to develop that. We've had a good meeting with them last week. They are far enough along that they're ready to announce some of that information to the commission and to the public. So staff will join Summit on February 21st to announce what Summit's plans are to serve this market at that meeting.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Glad to hear the update.
Any comments on anything you'd like to have included in those comments? From the Summit? Any suggestions?
Oh, as long as everything's there. Well, certainly, I would ask if what we've been shared, even from the onset of this movement, that we hear about all of it, even with the digital divide and all that. So if all that's going to be part of what we know, we were asked for Summit to take upon themselves. I'm ready to hear it.
Yes. Okay. All right. Excellent. Okay, that brings us to our city attorney, section 6, and we have under B1 a proposal.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and Palmer, I'm sorry, if I can, I just want to interject real quick to clear up any confusion, especially for the public. When we discussed this item at the Friday agenda study, it was the commission's directive to remove the item from the agenda. However, throughout the day Friday, and particularly Chuck Barnby and Brian Ruiz, they were working with some of the related agencies that we're dealing with on this item. And it was determined that there is a deadline coming up Friday of this week that in order for us to be included in the potential funding, we needed to meet. And so because of that, I made the decision, rightly or wrongly, hopefully correctly, to keep the item on the agenda. And so Chuck has worked quickly on Friday, and we had discussions throughout the weekend about amending the resolution to include some of the items that we heard from the commission. So I felt like because of the timing opportunity here, if we do not meet that deadline, we will be pushed back a year before we would have that opportunity again. So I just felt that it was important for the commission to understand that timing, for me to report back on that, and for the commission to have the ability to review now the proposed amendments to that resolution. So that's why this item remains on the agenda, and with that, I will yield to Palmer.
And let me add that our city manager and I discussed this then Friday afternoon, and I was in full support of this addition because we'd otherwise lose another year. So just to get it queued up, why not get it queued up right? So that's the nature of the having left it behind. Okay.
And you should have a resolution that reflects some of the changes that were discussed on Friday and strikeout underlined before you. This is proposed resolution number 22-003, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Lakeland, Florida, expressing support for the West Lake Hunter Trail, the Florida Department of Transportation's feasibility study, authorizing the city manager to submit funding requests to the Polk Transportation Planning Organization and the Florida Department of Transportation for phases of or the entire West Lake Hunter Trail corridor on behalf of the city, providing an effective date.
Move for approval.
Second.
And if I could, but before you make that motion, if you look at section 4 of the ordinance, there's in red, it begins with for segments 2 and 4. There's been a request to change that to say between segments in 2 and 4, so that would actually encompass the entire Lake Hunter frontage for a possible boardwalk or some kind of treatment similar to that. So if you could make the motion again, if that's your desire to change section 4 to say between segments 2 and 4.
I hadn't called for it
Yeah.
yet. Is there a motion to approve?
I motion to approve that particular,
With
for that
the-
change, with the change.
Second.
Motion to approve in a second. Discussion by commissioners. Yes, Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. City Manager, for what you did, and having hindsight, I would say, been using wisdom. You know, wisdom is the principle of the thing. And we continue to want to use wisdom in what we do and how we do. Certainly because of what we, and my colleagues had shared on Friday, the concerns we had about this particular situation. And for you all to move forward so we will not lose in timing and proper funding that we could receive, even with the changes that we wanted to make sure that would happen. I saw you did that in this particular resolution as it appears now. And I know we've had our discussions over the years about certain things that seem like it just don't line up or may not line up, but it takes years to sometimes get these things, come into play. But if you get it piece by piece, you start seeing the development as you want it to be. And certainly I believe what we're saying here with this change in the resolution as it presented to us today, we will see that. We will see it come about, and it takes piece by piece. But I've seen things that, was voted on back in 2016, and it's 22, and now it's just coming to fruition. But I know it takes that. So I think from, again, hindsight and using wisdom, and again, wisdom is the principle of the thing, I can go along with what has been presented. So thank you.
Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to ask Chuck Barnby if he would just walk us through some of the revisions and hit the highlights of, what's been changed and how that reflects our comments from Friday.
All right. Well, there we go. Good morning, everybody. For the record, Chuck Barnby with the Community and Economic Development Department. And so, as many of you know, the Florida Department of Transportation is wrapping up its feasibility study for what we call the Westlake Hunter Trail. And it essentially extends the New York Avenue cycle track from the Lime Street Sykes Boulevard intersection down to Ariana Street, immediately north of Lakeland Christian School. And so the feasibility study, at least in terms of what was recommended in that work developed by DOT, was either replacing the 5-foot sidewalk either on an earthen berm or a retaining wall within the project area. So it would be closer to Sykes Boulevard, and essentially the eastern side of the western side of the sidewalk would be held where it is today, and then the trail would get extended over to the west or to the east. I'll get my direction straight. Based on the conversation that we had on Friday, there was certainly a desire from the commission to look at some over-the-water alternatives, and particularly what's shown on the screen up here is segments 2 and 4, with a lot of discussion about 3 as well, and to maximize the benefit to the lakefront. So based on that conversation, we've had additional discussions with DOT about, in terms of our funding request for this week, focusing perhaps on the far north section, segments 5 and 6. Another phase that we'd be pursuing in the short term would be segment 1. And in the meantime, look at our options to address that over-the-water alignment for segments 2, 3, and 4, so that we do have something that not only serves a transportation purpose, but also maximizes the use of the lakefront in this area. There have been some discussions over the weekend about additional types of over-the-water treatments. DOT responded back this morning and said that we would still need an additional environmental type analysis to look at those because of the impacts of the submerged lands. But those are things that we will certainly be working on if the resolution were to pass, just to make sure that as we get initial phases of this project funded, that we're able to roll into the next phase and so on until the project is completed. At this point, depending on if you're looking at more of an earthen berm or retaining wall type construction method, the cost estimates for the entire project would be somewhere between $2.5 and $9 million. So it is certainly not an inexpensive project. Over the water features, we don't know what those costs are at this point. We're certainly having those conversations with DOT, so there'll be a lot more coming forward. But the intent is to make this a showpiece for our lake-to-lake system on the west side of the central city area, and to provide ultimately connectivity to southwest Lakeland, including the neighborhoods in and around the airport.
And this broadens us also to recreational funds that might be available later.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Which is important. This also means that from the way the language would read in here, that from really where we show section 2 to section 4, we could be completely over the water in that whole span. And so instead of just small bulge outs, we would have had otherwise. Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Manager and Chuck, for working over the weekend. I know that was one of the reasons we tabled it, was we didn't think that you might have the time over a holiday weekend to work on this, but thank you for seeing that deadline and for doing the extra work to get this to us today. So with your explanation, I'm just making sure that I understand on section 1, when it includes the segments 1, 3, 5, and 6, that is for additional study for those because they're not currently including in segment 3 an over-the-water option.
That's correct. We'd be looking at the analysis. The additional analysis would be for segments 2, 3, and 4, and then we would proceed with funding in this round for segments 5 and 6 on the north end, and then the next round we would expect to submit a funding request for phase 1 or segment 1. So we would work on the bookends and then bias time to work on the middle to get that over the water option.
Okay, it was a little confusing when I read it over the weekend, section 4, including segments 2 and 4, with preferring the construction of over-the-water alignment options and not including segment 3. Is that because they currently don't have an over-the-water option on section 3, and that would be identified later in the study in section 1?
That's correct.
Okay.
And one other question I would add to that is, why wouldn't we use the word between segments 2 and 4?
And we can certainly make that change.
That was part of the.
That was part of the change we just did, wasn't it?
No,
It did not?
Section 4 says 4 segments 2 and 4.
Yeah, it does not include 3. And I
That,
think
and
that
that's
was-
what
That
I,
was our,
Oh, that was our,
Yeah.
that was our change.
we made the change.
Okay.
Between.
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, I explained that to the commission before they,
Okay, I just didn't see it on
So
there.
section 4 now says what?
Segments two, between segments two.
the language I suggested that the motion and second was based on is to change section 4 to begin with the words between segments 2 and 4.
Okay.
So it's changed from 4 to between.
Got it.
Right.
Okay, so I mean, we do include, we prefer it for 2 and 4 as well, though.
Which would be between,
2 and 4.
so that it would include
Like contiguous from 2 to 4.
2, 3, and 4, right?
We can add the word inclusive
Yeah,
to
because
that.
between
Yeah,
lets me
okay.
think that we're like exchanging
I
3
see.
for 2 and 4.
I see. Yeah, make it inclusive, however you, what
Yeah,
would-
however, it includes all of them in the best
We need
way.
to say beginning with 2, because that is just the end of 2 to the
Beginning with
beginning
2
of
and ending
4.
over the water.
We can wordsmith this thing a while, you know, because we can all wordsmith it and make it, as long as it shows 2, 3, and 4, that's what we're concerned about, right?
Or if it's just 4 segments 2 through 4. If it's the word
Wow.
through there.
My other question is, and I
got a
sent this to you
motion.
over the weekend, Chuck, is when you think about the downtown west, and I'm really hopeful that, and I'm not sure if at our strategic planning retreat, we'll have an unveiling of kind of our downtown west connection with downtown. I know I've been asking for that for quite some time, just so that we can see a master plan of our pedestrian bike connection, you know, going to Bonnet Spring Park and all the options. I know we spent a considerable time, Commissioner Walker, and at our last strategic planning, talking about giving us a visual of how that downtown west is connected. So with that in mind, thinking of the big picture here, I look at Hartselle Avenue and think about Twin Lakes and Blake, you know, our elementary school, thinking a beautiful opportunity to make sure that that's included in a safe way. I don't know, you know, certainly I do appreciate the boardwalk and being over the water, but if that would preclude some kind of a chance to leave the boardwalk and get onto Hartselle to cut through there. And I'm certainly hopeful that we're going to bore a path for pedestrians and bikes under the railroad at the 5 Points roundabout to get to Bonnet Springs Park. I know that our hope is for some time in the future to do the very expensive pedestrian bike walkway over the tracks at New York cycle track that doesn't seem like anyone currently uses, and then somehow to end at Lake Wire, a very dangerous intersection, and then somehow get over to Bonnet Springs Park. That seems very convoluted and long-term to me. When I think about people who live here currently would probably jump on this path and want to connect from Hartselle over to Lake Beulah and under the overpass to get to Bonnet Springs Park. I don't know what I don't know, but that's why I love a master plan, because you may have some other configuration to get us to Bonnet Springs Park in more expedited fashion. But I as much as I want this to be a boardwalk, and that I think the mayor was right, and I appreciated his bringing that up, I hate to go far into the water, then there's no way to safely maybe get that Hartselle connection. That's Hartselle, right?
Yes.
There's a light right there, and to get over, yeah, to me, I think that makes sense. But like I said, that's why I would love the master plan, so that I can see how all of those things connect and ultimately get us to the park.
And that's exactly, even with an over-the-water option, we would have to come back in and tie in with the signal at Hartselle and at Greenwood to be able to
Okay.
take advantage of those crossings. And the resolution does include language, and the feasibility study did include some recommendations on how to improve those crossings, those traffic lights. And so that's definitely on our radar screen. And Hartselle is definitely the most direct route to get from the Lake Hunter Trail to Lake Beulah and then on to Bonnet Springs. On the east side of the street is owned by the Housing Authority and the school district, and so we would work with them to acquire an easement or additional right-of-way to put something in on the east side. But that is definitely something that's on our pathways plan today.
Yeah, to me, to then be able to see our beautiful Veterans Park is highly attractive, in my opinion, as an option.
Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Chuck, looking at sections 2 through 4, so assuming this passes, would the steps to determine the type of environmental analysis, if it's a PD&E study, what's the timing on that? Do we have to get with DOT and decide how much it costs, what we need, and who's paying for what?
Exactly. We would need to take a look at the level of analysis that would be required by DOT, the cost of that, the local share, and then should an over-the-water option be determined to be feasible, then again, we would need to look at how we would partner with DOT on the cost of that trail. Typically, when it comes to pure transportation dollars, there's a basic design that DOT will fund through the normal funding processes, generally through the Federal Highway Administration. In anything that's we would call enhanced or aesthetically, an aesthetic design or something that's over that standard, the local governments are typically expected to pay for and also maintain. And so we would need to work out those details. The other thing, and this, to the mayor's point about recreational trail funding, if we're able to tap into some of those dollars, then I think we're able to get more aesthetic enhancements and not necessarily have to rely on the transportation funds or, to do that. But I think, if this resolution were to pass, the next step would be to look at the local dollars that are available, the phases that still need to be done to address segments 2, 3, and 4, and then working with the Department of Transportation, Parks and Recreation, and our other partners to be able to put that plan in motion so that if we're successful on the north end and on the south end with getting the trail funded, that we're able to deal with the middle.
Thank you.
Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And why I agree with, the comment made by my fellow colleague, Commissioner Madden, about the connectivity, that we need to make sure that it's inclusive from that, in that southwest corridor. I sit here and think, we still got to get people from the northwest corridor over to BSP. So I know this particular resolution, that we're voting on today, has no bearing on that particular area, but I'm concerned about that because you still got to get folk from that segment of our city to BSP. And I was in hopes of thinking, well, when I heard conversation about the Lake Wire piece, which brings that, Lake Wire neighborhood, all that area there, and they can get over to BSP, that might be our connecting point. Of course, I'm like Commissioner Madden, my dear sister, I don't know. I'm not a planner. But I certainly want to make sure that we have the connectivity for all to be able to enjoy this amenity that's coming out of the ground for, for the sake of what we want it to be for, and we have the actual participation by all citizens in our city. So I thought I'd put that on record, that's all.
And the north entry to the Bonnet Springs Park might do that also,
It could.
eventually on a longer term
Just
basis.
want to make sure we don't forget about that area too as well.
That's Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Chuck, you might can answer this. I know that Lake Hollingsworth via Hollingsworth Creek runs into the little lake, Lake Bentley, I believe. Yeah. And of course, Lake Bonnet and Parker run into Saddle Creek, which ultimately go into Hancock and Peace River. Does Lake Hunter have any outfall or infall? Is that pretty much an isolated lake? I guess I'm talking about the environmental component of it, pollution and stuff that may be incurred in reference to this particular lake.
I'll rely on Public Works as far as I don't know off the top of my head, but I'll follow up with either Greg James or Lori Smith to get an answer for you on that. But I know that this is tied to the stormwater project over by the RP Funding Center that was completed last year, but I don't know in terms of how Lake Hunter drains to the rest of the basin. But we can certainly find that out for you.
Because I realize, and of course, unfortunately, we had a pretty good discussion on Friday, which our general public maybe got to hear a little bit about, but invariably, we're asking for something that's going to be a substantial cost overrun than what we would typically see on Lake Parker or Lake Hollingsworth. Of course, I think it's going to be a great enhancement for the West Lakeland and connectivity from our trails and everything else. And I don't want to stifle our ability to get something, like I said, one Mercedes versus getting a Ford or something of that nature. But I do greatly appreciate the stuff that you've done here. I think you've relayed it pretty good on this particular, and I appreciate, Sean, of y'all bringing it up so we can get in the mix already. This is gonna be 2027, 2030 anyway. So the sooner the better. And
Sure.
I just commend it. I would like to give us the blessing and move forward.
We'd just like it in our lifetime. A comment, any other comments? As a suggestion on section 4, if we said 4 segments, 2, 3, and 4, and then let the language follow, then it takes away all the between and all that kind of thing.
And then one other thing that probably needs to be changed is in section 1, there's a reference to endorsing the plan for segments 1, 3, 5, and 6. We probably need to remove 3 from that section. Chuck, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, that.
No problem with that. We can take that out.
Okay.
So we had a motion, we can either withdraw it and.
Draw my motion and now make a new motion, if the second would act.
Yep, I will remove my second, yes.
And make sure that we have section 1 to remove number 3 out of that, and then add 3 to section 4, if I heard it correct. To say for segments 2, 3, and 4.
Yes, sir.
And I will second that again.
Any qualms on any of that? Okay.
As long as Palmer's okay.
Any other
we're okay.
discussion? Any other discussion or questions by the audience? This is a roll call vote, so we'll start with Commissioner McLeod.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimously passes. Thank you for working through that and doing it in a timely way. That's wonderful news. All right, we have no report from the Finance Director, and we have no utility, and that brings us to audience comments. So please state your name, sir, and address, and come on. Thank you for your patience. Hope it was profitable for you today.
I have drank way too much water.
Good morning.
Good morning.
By now, you probably know I'm Ray Feldwick at 4342 Tacosi Place in Morgan Creek. I wanted to give you folks an update, if I may. PUD 21-056 is a major modification to the original Morgan Creek Preserve Plan. It came before the Planning and Zoning Board in October of last year. Given the totally dissimilar nature of Morgan Creek and Gresham Trails, and the fact that they are not connected and do not share any amenities and common areas, Morgan Creek asked the Planning and Zoning Board to approve the PUD contingent upon turnover of Morgan Creek. The November 16th meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board approved this PUD requiring each development to have its own homeowners association. The developer's agent, Mr. John Hall, gave absolute assurances the community would be turned over and said the developer had retained an independent attorney independent law firm to facilitate this. Morgan Creek lawyers asked Sperry Law Firm, who's Landstar's lawyers, for a contact at Bush Ross, the independent firm facilitating turnover. Late last week, the gentleman from Bush Ross emailed, per 720, turnover will occur 3 months after 90% of the parcels in all phases of the community that will ultimately be operated by the homeowners association have been conveyed to members other than the developer. Since the community is still being developed and homes are being added, this date is probably years off. We hope this is a misconception or miscommunication between Landstar, Sperry, and Bush Ross. Our lawyers have provided pertinent sections of both the November 16th Planning and Zoning Board meeting and the December 20 City Commissioners meetings where the developer's agent, again Mr. John Hall, committed Landstar to turning over the committee. And we await Bush Ross's response. There is obvious disappointment in the community as it is possible the residents may have to bear the cost of civil action to get back what was promised. This is why actually we asked for the amendment on section Q in the PUD. So we'll keep you updated as the situation unfolds. However, I have had many questions from the residents, as you can imagine, and I don't have an answer for them. One of them is, our city ordinance legally binding? Did the parties actually have, I would hope they are. So that's a question for Mr. Davis. I mean, is this ordinance legally binding on all parties?
Certainly.
Then,
As to what is within the city's jurisdiction, which is the zoning and land use of that area, as far as the internal governance of the HOAs out there, that's a product of state law and private contract rights. But, some of what the city did on December 20th, may have, a consequence to how all that plays out with regard to the HOA and state law.
yeah, the ordinance, as I understand it, calls for 2 homeowners associations. And that's why I emphasize the in the response from Bush Ross and each in the city ordinance. So they're incompatible. And my question is, could we at least expect a letter from the city to Landstar to tell them that what Bush Ross is saying to our attorney is not what was ordained at your December 20th meeting?
I mean, I haven't seen the letter from Bush Ross, so I wouldn't want to commit to that. I mean, our ordinance does speak for itself and does require a separate HOA for phase 1 and phase 2 regression trails.
Thank you very much. I will get you a copy of all the email correspondence between our land use attorney and Bush Ross. And we'll go from there. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, and I'd like to add, if I could, Mr. Feldwick, in my conversation with the principal at Landstar, there was not a long-term, release of that. It was that when the approval would take place, there's a normal, and I'm clear out of my area here, but there's a section 720 or something that's part of the state's law on homeowners association. As soon as that period of 120 days or something had convened, it flips into the 2 associations. So that was clearly there's no conversation about it having gone long. So I would hope you're right that the letter you received is misconstrued.
Yes, I realize it was a holiday weekend and everything, but it was sprung on us late Thursday afternoon. It came out of the blue, and we thought things were rolling along. And you asked at the commissioners' meeting, I've got it right here, what's the maximum time for turnover? And Hall answered, it said the maximum duration is 90 days after the 20-day appeal period, and that all lots in all phases have been sold. That explains how the clock starts ticking at 20 plus 90 days, or 110 days from the date of approval. So,
right.
Yeah. So it's clear what the city's intentions were, both the planning is and yourselves. And I would hope that you would make that known to the.
That's what we approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from anyone in the audience? Yes, please just state your name, sir.
Oh, sorry.
And your comments.
And you're up.
No, you gotta go here, Pastor, you gotta go here. Oh.
You can put that down
Put it
underneath
down,
the
yeah.
camera. It'll show. The red dot.
Yep. There it is.
Slightly crooked, I apologize.
Okay.
But my name is John Freed, resident of the Lakeland area. Thank you for hearing me again. This Saturday, January the 22nd, marks the 49th anniversary of the Supreme Court ruling of Roe v. Wade, as it's been commonly understood. In my opinion, the worst decision that the High Court of the United States has ever made. And so since that point in time, 63 million, almost 500,000 babies have been killed in the United States of America. A couple years following that decision, an abortion clinic was opened here in the city of Lakeland, still down on South Florida Avenue now, and they have exterminated by surgical means approximately 50,000 babies from the time that they opened. If you think about the population of Lakeland being roughly 100,000, that's half of the population of Lakeland, at least in the city limits and close there. And that doesn't even include the pill abortions. Those numbers are not counted. They're not counted here. They're not counted really anywhere in the United States. Those numbers are kind of unknown, which is very unfortunate. So I'm just speaking today. You know, we remember a lot of great things. Yesterday being Martin Luther King Jr. Day, in honor of a great man who fought a very hard fight and made great progress for the well-being of the United States of America. And so we still honor him and his efforts and the great things that he did to this very day. I can't imagine how many lives, how many people possibly like Dr. Martin Luther King have been eliminated through the course of abortion. And so just a few days here, January 22nd, this Saturday, will mark that 49th anniversary of that terrible decision by the Supreme Court. And so I'm just here to speak for the voiceless for just a moment. And I want to invite all of you commissioners, the mayor as well, or any city staff, or any of the public to join us at the Polk County March for Life, which will be kind of right behind you on the old steps of City Hall. This coming Saturday. My paper doesn't show a time. It's 9:30 a.m. I wish I had a little pen. I would just write it on there real quick. 9:30 a.m. So we'll have some wonderful presentations, and then we'll take a march around City Hall and around Lake Mirror to stand up for life in the hopes that one day abortion will be eradicated from our nation. But even before then, I hope Lakeland becomes a leader in the action to say abortion should be eliminated from our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other audience comments at all? Seeing none, this is members of the commission. Who would like to share? Commissioner McCarley.
I wanted to I feel like I've been really quiet this morning, but I wanted to share about the homeowners associations and property owners associations along with developers. As we continue to see Lakeland grow, I think it's really important to communicate to our residents and our newcomers who are moving in 1,000 plus a day to the state of Florida that we can only do so much in municipal government, county government. When developers, develop their property, they have private property rights, and might approve a zoning change so that building can happen and we can have single-family homes or multifamily housing or whatever it is. But it really, I don't know where the onus lays on the developer or on the property managers as a whole or on the municipalities and counties in which these developments pop up. But it seems to me that we are going to continue to have more issues like we've heard today, whether it's Sandpiper, which I really commend everyone coming today and talking to us about how they feel about the sidewalks. But I thank Mr. Lazenby and saying that was in our, comprehensive plan and our CIP starting in 2018. So that predates a few of us up here on the dais, but that was part of that, and it came about as a resident's, question or want or need. And then we're, fast forward, and I think that the mayor handled that really well in saying, this is really a family meeting type of thing, and we need to work with the POA or the HOA. And so the community residents themselves need to have an understanding of how they work and how they operate when they decide to move to Lakeland or move into a new home or whatever the case may be. It's kind of one of the tricky things about development is, I had shared with my colleagues a while back, there's a book called Swamp Peddlers. It's how Cape Coral, Port Charlotte, Palm Bay, different communities across the state of Florida had sold lots to blue-collar northerners in the 40s and 50s, $10 down, $10 a month, and then lo and behold, they come down here and go to Lehigh Acres and they can't even find where their plot is that they've been paying for most of their life because there were some, ill repute developers at the time. That also, there are also septic, I can go into it, there's septic tanks and all sorts of stuff that did environmental damage to us, and probably one of the reasons we have red tide and algae and all this is the way those developers weren't held into account the way that our developers are now. So part of the problem, I think, is to communication of, if I'm a home buyer, what I read in my contract and how I understand how my community is going to work. But I think as a municipality, we can take time to educate people And just like we did today, like it's unfortunate that it had to land here, but I love that this commission and our staff works diligently to educate the community at large at what the process is, but I also love when residents ask what the process is, because there is one. So I think as we move forward in approving new developments, we need to be always cognizant and mindful of, are we sure that these residents, as they're coming in, that not only do they feel welcome, do they understand the parameters with which the community they live in operates? So I just want to say thank you for doing that. But I do think it's something we have to continually think about. And I also think we have to think about where our new residents are coming from, because everybody rolls a little bit differently. And that's one of the reasons there's not curriculum on municipal government, is because every municipality, village, and town, as Mr. Walker well knows, the Florida League of Cities operates differently. So there isn't really a guidebook. It's based on individual charters. So I just want to bring that to the forefront of everyone's mind, appreciate the diligence of our staff. Our staff also has to work within Florida statute. So it's not like they're willy-nilly deciding how to do things, and it's something that is legal and that we're bound to and that we're held to. So just throwing that out there for everyone as we see these new developments pop up, and as this commission impacts, 5 years, 10 years from now, consider those things when we're working with our residents.
Excellent comment, thank you. Other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, where are my notes? Are y'all nervous? It's going to take too long. How much time do I have?
A lot of pages.
Kelly, start
Flipping through a lot of
clock.
pages.
Okay, number one. We have had several discussions about the COVID relief funds. And, I was a little cranky at how long it's been taking to get those relief funds. I do know that just like when you get reimbursements from after a hurricane, you don't want to claw back, and there are all the reasons why our finance guru and city manager are wanting to be cautious with regard to how we give away those COVID relief funds, because you have to cross every T and dot every I, or then, we become liable for those funds, or they claw them back. But in the meantime, Talbot House is breaking out with another, Omicron spread, and their residences and their staff, and they still are desperate to make a second payment for that boiler. They were required, obviously, to put the first payment down because we would not agree to release any funds as they really needed them, and wanted to wait for our consultant to tell us how to give out the funds appropriately. So they are coming up against a hard deadline for a second payment for the boiler. They have mechanical room issues, and certainly, like I said, COVID is still, a deterrent there, with regard to those residents in their apartments getting the Omicron. And so we actually still do have COVID. I'm surprised. I thought that the relief dollars would finally be distributed after COVID was in the rearview mirror, but hopefully I'm not that, my cynicism doesn't match our timeline, and that we get the funds as quickly as possible to the people who are very needy for these relief funds for COVID. So I just wanted to make sure that we are still expediting that process as much as physically possible with the consultant, and to remind our team that Talbot House has made several requests for those dollars. Also, number two, which I kind of mentioned already, is just to make sure as we approach the strategic planning, I'm super excited. That's our chance. As our residents know, many don't know, that this is our only time to talk with our colleagues is in publicly called meetings. And at our strategic planning retreat, we actually get a chance to sort of dream and talk about some things that each individual commissioner might have interest in, might have residents that they spoke to about, that they are trying to actively advocate on behalf of residents, maybe differently than the ordinances and resolutions that are given to us at our city commission meetings. And so that downtown west is a huge priority, I feel, for this commission. I can't speak to everyone, but I know especially with Bonnet Springs Park opening up soon, to Commissioner Walker's point, that northwest access. I actually bought a book at the new bookstore downtown, pressed, and it's really cool. It's a book, it's called Bridges, and I'll be bringing that to our strategic planning retreat just to give a visual about the powerful connection that bridges make. And it shows third world countries that are just across the stream from a field where they could plant vegetables, that they don't have access. It's a stone's throw away, but until a bridge is built, they don't have an opportunity to plant those fields. And then in cities and communities, the prosperity and the opportunities that open up. And what I've heard Commissioner McCarley speak to this with regard to arts and with museums and access. As we become more urban, some people will be sad that we are leaving behind some of our rural aesthetic, but as we enter into a more urban decade, for our city, that we have opportunities to bridge communities and make sure that they have access to our beautiful parks and to this children's museum that's coming in Bonnet Springs Park. So that Downtown West Master Plan and the connectivity is a huge, huge thing, and I just want to keep saying so nobody's surprised at the strategic planning. If for some reason we don't have that conversation, I'll be very disappointed. And then the third one is that I was unaware that in order to upgrade your golf cart with a seatbelt and a certain speed limit, that you had to have, by Florida statute, an ordinance from your city with regard to that's allowed, and then to where, what streets, that could be allowed. And so I happen to know residents, which I will not name them here publicly, who felt like if they added their seatbelt and did the state requirements, that they could ride on our roads in their golf carts, and love doing that and the opportunity to do that. So I wanted to bring this to my attention of my colleagues to say, is this something we'd be interested in? It seems that, folks are doing this, but it's, I guess, evidently not legal currently, unless we would make some kind of motion to have an ordinance, for that to be allowed, and it would probably take a study on which streets that is allowed. But I know that as we're going more multimodal, we're looking at things like the squeeze and microtransit. People are actually, even though I was outvoted on the scooters, people are buying scooters. And so I feel like that is where we're headed, like I mentioned, with the more urban, pedestrian-friendly, multimodal, microtransit ideas. I just want to make sure, just like we are thinking about fun things with containers to be like Sparkman Wharf, well, you can't do it unless you have an ordinance that says that you're allowed to use containers. And so sometimes you have to do these things behind the scene to make sure you're prepared and ready for some of the things that you want in a vibrant downtown community. So that was number 3. Number 4 is, I was so excited. One of my favorite things of the year is the Martin Luther King Parade. Not having it last year was so sad, as there's so many sad things, that COVID brought that we had to miss, from weddings and funerals. Certainly I don't want to try to make the parade equal to the hardship and the travesties, that people experience because of COVID and losing loved ones. But to see people and look them in the eye and to feel like you're just right with the community, one person at a time, and those children, sitting and cheering, it's just so fun for me. And so I was so happy to be able to participate in the Martin Luther King Parade again. I have a little friend, Ornell Brown, who lives on 10th Street, and every year I jump off the float and have to go give her a big hug, and it's like, I love it. It's so fun. But one thing that I noticed when we were going by the judges panel and the different, we don't get to see all the floats because we're on a float, but was the Citrus Connection bus is beautiful. Oh my gosh, as someone in marketing, to see the wrap on that bus, if you all haven't seen it, you need to look at it. It's Martin Luther King inspired. It has these visionary leaders of the past, and it's beautiful illustration on our wrap bus. So I want to give a big shout out to Citrus Connection. I think it is amazing. Like, it's a piece of art. I just want to follow it around town to look at it. So great job, Citrus Connection. And then I think is that my last thing? I think that's my last thing. It makes me nervous because we have a longer time before our next meeting since we have an extra week in January. So I think that's good, though. I did have Summit, but it's not, you addressed that, so I was glad about that. And I guess I'll hand over my time.
Thank you. Commissioner McCarley.
We call that a museum of art.
Yes,
So there you
I love
go.
it.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Very good.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes, Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to give a big thank you to all. I mean, when I say all, I want to capitalize letter A and both letters L, to all who helped make the MLK kind of activities that we do have, and with the city, of course, always, and people don't, I think, know how much the city does give, and when the in-kind donations as such, being a support to help make many of these activities or these events become reality for many organizations throughout our city. But certainly this past weekend when we saw the Jazz in the Park event move from where it started some 6 years ago in one of our, of course, our community parks, Simpson Park, and just outgrew that particular location. And now, of course, being in Mon Park as it was this past Friday night, it was awesome. And even with the cool weather, as it was, to see the I think the connectivity between communities, and that's what we need even more, because if we're gonna move forward, y'all, we gotta have some participation by everybody. And I don't mean it to be in a negative kind of way, but letting you know that we have to do that. So even moving that particular event to Mon Park, I saw the synergy from every walk of life that was coming through the park and sat there and stood there as we did, right, brother? In the cold, and enjoyed the nice music and all. But thank you to all that made it happen. Not only that, as Commissioner Madden has already said, the MLK parade, and there were some questions as even up to the time of parade, folk texting or calling me and asking me, well, we having a parade this year. I thought, wow, the word didn't get out as it should. I know we did our part from City Hall to make sure people knew there was a parade and would be this year. I'm glad it was. And so we saw that, and it was a very good parade. I think they had over 105 units involved with the parade this year. So it's definitely even expanding. And just for information's sake, even the participation the city gives to support IMA with their prayer breakfast, and have done that for years. Even before I came on this dais, for years have support that organization's particular event every year on MLK actual holiday itself. And I think just for you all to know, for information's sake, the youth oratorical contest, they have always been part of the week of activities, or coming into the holiday week as we call it, is being moved to next month. I understand, we're talking with one of the coordinators, is being moved next month to help celebrate Black History Month. And that particular oratorical contest has grown as well, with having participants from not only just Lakeland schools, but schools outside of Lakeland as well.
So they did not have that this year?
It won't be. Usually it's like, I think Thursday, because Monday's a holiday, and they're trying to do anything on Wednesday, because we meet on like a holiday like this.
Because I thought we'd missed it on the calendar, so that's good news. No,
it's not. It's going to be held next month during Black History Month. That's what I understand for talking to one of the coordinators of that particular event. Lastly, we'll be together, I think, next week for Polk County Days, right? Polk County Days is next week.
Yes, sir.
You haven't got about it. So we'll be going to Tallahassee. And of course, after that, we got Lakeland Days 2. And after that, we got FLC Days 3. So thank you to my colleagues for supporting our efforts when it comes to that. Thank you, Ms. Oh, let me make sure I make this announcement, because we know in some of the more, I guess, challenging communities in our city, COVID testing and that kind of thing screening has been a challenge, but there will be a special screening and testing on this coming Wednesday at St. Luke Ministries, in the heartbeat, of course, of the African American community on West Crescent Street, 910 West Crescent Street. The Central Florida Health Care is providing screening and testing and all, and it's free, so no charge while the supplies last. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. And it's great to get updates and all these different things going on. Last but not least, and I'm
good. I think it's been covered.
Invariably, Pig Fest is going to be the 28th, 29th.
Yes.
So that's remember that. It's a big charity event, and it's a lot of fun. So it's one of my favorite events.
January or February?
That's
January 20th.
Next week, not this weekend, but the following weekend.
Friday, January 28th. Yep.
I did not know that. Okay, 28th, 29th. And that's at Sun and Fun.
Yes.
All right, any others? Yes, Commissioner Madden.
Sorry, I did want to, so it wasn't in my notes because I didn't anticipate the citizen words today, but I did say that that was pretty compelling if that's the truth, that the 49th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, and, you know, back then we were sold that it was an attempt to have it be safe, legal, and rare if half of our population has been exterminated through surgical abortions. I would love clarification on that number to see if it, in fact, our local clinic has performed 50,000 surgical abortions. I don't know if you could give me the information on that so I could see that for myself.
It's approximately 1,000, John Freed, again, approximately 1,000 a year. Obviously, there's ebbs and flow there. And so since they're opening in 1975, that puts you up at, what would that be, 45, 46,000. And as of, trying to remember the exact date, but roughly 2 years ago, the numbers were 48,000. So we don't have numbers from 2020 or 2021, but in 2019, it was 48,000 that had been performed in Lakeland up to that point. So estimating, using the 1,000 at kind of a rough average of 1,000, add 2,000 to that for the following 2 years. And again, that doesn't include pill abortions.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, Commissioner McLeod.
Well, you mentioned this at the start of the meeting, Mayor, but I did want to just commend Commissioner Walker on his message yesterday at the Martin Luther King breakfast of unity, community, and opportunity, and it was powerful, and I thought you did a great job. And I said to him afterwards, I learned that Commissioner Walker can both preach and sing. So
That's right. Those are two good takeaways. Excellent. Thank you. All right. Are there any other matters that you want to bring up before the commission? If not, we are adjourned.
Sorry about that. I thought he was motioning for you.